In September 1958, 2 cases of some strange paranormal activity were reported in Fife. One had been going on for months, and the family were at the end of their tether, while the other happened over a few nights in a local hotel. Both cases were unsettling for those involved. At Oak Tree Square in Kirkcaldy, strange things began to happen to the Forsyth family. The unusual goings-on had begun in February that year, when drawers began to open when no one was near them. 37-year-old coal merchant James Forsyth placed cardboard under the feet of the chest of drawers, thinking this would stop them from opening. The next day, the same thing happened. It later transpired the family dog also began to refuse to go upstairs, and his wife, Ida, and their 9 children, aged between 15 and 9 months, began losing sleep as footsteps could be heard on the landing when no one was there. Eventually, Forsyth was unable to work due to lack of sleep from all the nightly disturbances. As time went on, the family began telling their friends and neighbours about the strange occurrences. Archibald McElhatton, who lived in the next street, Veronica Crescent, wasn't a friend, but had heard these stories. So one night, the Forsyths asked him if he'd like to come to the house, so he did so on Sunday, 7th September. As the evening turned to night, he became aware of noises. He heard 6 bumps like the noise of a walking stick, the sound of a scuffle or fight on the stairs, and heard the sound of drawers opening and them being dragged across the floor. When he went to investigate, the cardboard used to stop the drawers from opening was found discarded. At 3 o'clock in the morning, McElhatton left along with 4 of the Forsyth children, including their 14-year-old daughter, who was frightened out of her wits. She refused to go back to the house, while Mrs. Forsyth ended up staying with a friend. She was at her wits' end, as things had escalated. The following day, all of the children ended up sleeping with friends or neighbours, while Forsyth contacted the council to get rehoused, and refused to pay any more rent until someone from the local authority stayed in the house overnight to witness the strange goings-on. Finally, on Monday 8th September, John Lees of the Housing Department of the council and Councillor James Barron spent the night in the house, along with Margaret Neal from Edinburgh, a paranormal investigator. She would later claim she saw the ghostly figure of a boy of around 9 years old in the living room at around 3 a.m. The Forsyths had lost a son who would have been 9 at the time. Rumours and speculation were rife. Had someone taken their own life in the house, and was it their ghost haunting it? Or was it down to the previous tenant, Mrs. May Smith, or her mother, May Kidd, who was a spiritualist, holding séances? This was denied by the mother and daughter, who'd lived there for 10 years. Mrs. Kidd did suggest, however, that the entity may have come with the Forsyths when they moved into the house. Neither Barron nor Lees heard anything, but could see Mr. and Mrs. Forsyth were anxious throughout the night. However, they refused the family a move. A Mr. Marcel Jankanowski, living in Laurel Crescent, offered to do a swap with the family, not really believing in the story of the poltergeist. Forsyth collapsed on the Tuesday, exhausted. On the Wednesday, 2 evangelists appeared to bless the house and the family, while nearer midnight 2 mediums appeared. On Thursday, 18th September, The local Member of Parliament for Kirkcaldy, Tom Hubbard, stayed the night in the house, and afterwards stated that he was convinced Forsyth had made it all up. It was at this time the council realised that they were doing work in the close between the house and its neighbour, as they were repairing a cracked ceiling, suggesting the neighbour may have been using a broom or rake to hit it. For this to go on so long, though, doesn't make any sense. In the end, and following a visit to Jankanowski's house, Forsyth decided not to do the swap. This was due to a dark lobby, which he thought would freak out his wife and children. By this time, things were going from bad to worse. Forsyth was threatened with prosecution from the education authorities, as his school-aged children had missed 2 weeks of schooling. Explaining the lack of sleep, the 6 eventually returned, but only in the afternoons to begin with. Forsyth also faced rent arrears, and the council threatened eviction if they weren't paid. He managed to pay the £16 thanks to loans from family and friends. The family were eventually offered a house in Wright Place. The night before the move, the linoleum in the upstairs bedroom had been lifted, and the family heard footsteps in the rooms. As a result of everything that had been going on, Forsyth had also fallen behind on payments for his van, and if he didn't make a payment, it threatened to end his livelihood. By 8th October, the family were in their new home, and the new tenants of their old house in Oak Tree Square, Mr. and Mrs. Alex Dewar, were convinced that the strange noises that could be heard had been coming from the plumbing system. But could there be another explanation? Could workings at Seafield Colliery be behind the strange noises and the drawers opening due to blasting? At the same time as the Forsyth family were experiencing these strange phenomena, so too were 3 musicians in St Andrews. St Andrews has its fair share of ghosts and spooky tales, but that September at Russack's Marine Hotel, Ian Dunn and his 2 fellow bandmates, Bob MacDonald and George Piplado, experienced some seriously strange events. They were coming to the end of their 12-week stint at the hotel on Lynx Crescent. It was well used by golfers coming to play the famous courses at St Andrews. The bandmates had use of a small annex, which was their home during this time, and following a gig on Thursday 11th September, the 3 of them headed off to bed. In the early hours of the Friday morning, the 3 men were woken by a sudden thud, followed by another one. The light was switched on. The book 18-year-old Piplado had been reading, along with a salt cellar, hit the wall close to 25-year-old Dunn's bed. The 3 were sleepy, so the light was turned off, and all 3 were soon drifting off again, when another loud thud was heard. It was a thick leather belt belonging to 18-year-old MacDonald, and had been thrown with such force at the same spot in the wall as the other items that the buckle broke off from the leather of the belt. 2 scarves were also thrown across the room. For the rest of the night, the light stayed on in the annex. At 3 a.m, they reported the incidents to the under-manager of the hotel, and he went to the room and saw the items lying on the floor near Dunn's bed, while the men explained what had happened. Dunn later stated the same kind of thing happened over the next 2 nights in the early hours. During these nights, a cup, a dish, and an ink bottle were thrown from the mantelpiece, and in all the events, the items were thrown towards the hotel. On Sunday, 14th, the group left as their time for playing there was up, and no further mysterious goings-on in the annex were ever reported again. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.